Wowzers, it took me so long to make both of these videos. I remember spending hours in making both of these, and this one took me months, with even my cat dying along the way. It was very successful. After that, I went back to developing Farmbotany, and this is how it turned out. My friend wanted me to do captions for the unboxing of my computer, but we were too lazy to do it by hand, so my friend came up with the idea of using an automatic tool instead, and changing the parts that were wrong. But to use the automatic tool, we needed to install Python on his computer. So I thought, why not run Farmbotany? And that's what I did. I installed Python on the repo, only to boot it up and see it is pathetic as though. The Binding of Isaac ran just fine, so why didn't my game world? The first thing I thought it was because of the engine and programming language. The problem with Python it is pretty slow, and the problem with Pygame, the engine I was using this time, is that it honestly kind of sucks. It is super slow, has no GPU acceleration, no shaders, and uses base STL 1.0, and is overall not what I want from a thing. I know that Pygame is meant to be used for fun, programs or very basic games at max, so the problem was really just me. But I had to learn one thing by that. Pygame is not the engine we're going to be using for Farmbotany, and the longer I wait, the harder it is to switch. So stress started growing on me. After I thought about it for a little bit, I decided to keep Pygame for now, but keep that topic in mind. The current version of Farmbotany was like an essential feature, saving. Back then, if you closed the game, we lost your progress forever. There are a bunch of excellent games out there that suck balls just because it doesn't have saving. So I decided to add that. I made a menu that lets you create new roles with proper naming and seed. The seed does nothing for now, but it is essential for later. After some time of coding, I managed to get it to create saves. Here's the first ever save in Farmbotany history! And here's the first one that I actually saved. It took me a while to get everything to work, and I'm probably gonna change the layout of this in some time, but for now this is what it is. For now you can delete files within the program, and if you want to delete a save, you gotta manually go there and delete the files, but I may add a delete button in the version 0.6. By the way, I now have a website, accessed in catgg64.github.io. A bit earlier, about the Rust programming language bug. Right now it's absolutely destroyed. Ironically, this fold here was because I was in the mattress on the hall, and I went over to pet Mel, and then my hand caused the fold. Good old days. I read almost half the book, and I also did some projects to get the hang of things. After that, I started experimenting with graphics and Windows. At first glance, I wanted to use Raylib, but I couldn't get it to work because of development libraries, so I tried MacroQuad, and it worked. But I wanted something more from the ground up. Then I tried STL and it worked. I wrote a basic engine, but I wanted to get it to 3D. I did a previous edit of Pygames to see if I could get 3D to work, but it was the following. The only different thing about 2D and 3D is the Z-axis. The Z-axis does nothing but say, how much X should this be divided by, and how much Y should this be divided by. In other words, the greater the Z, the smaller and slower it is. Then there's turning, which is really fucked me up, and I had to use ChatGPT for that one. We'll talk about that later, okay? But after that, I didn't do much related to that. But that's when I heard about the Bad Ideas Game Jam. It was a 1 month long game jam made by Johnny Razor, and I really wanted to participate because 1, I'm a fan of Johnny and his content, and 2, because it was great distraction from Farmbotany, so I could let off some steam and do whatever I think is the most fun about game development. So for this small jam, I needed to make a simple game so I could finish it in time. So that the next logical thing, make it 3D and not use an engine. Instead, I was going to use pure STL to build an engine from scratch. Because who cares if the game is good or anything? The only part that matters is to make a video yapping our ass off with random technical explanations that no one cares about. Whatever, no one plays my games nor watches my videos anyways. Like, if you're actually watching this, you might just be the chosen one. Maybe in the future, when I become a millionaire because of Farmbotany, you could say you were there since the very beginning. I'm just joking. Now, that's never gonna happen. If this video gets 4 views, I'm shocked. I was planning on making the engine before the jam, so I had a roughly 1 week window. You know, a kid plus custom engine that needs to be from scratch versus a bunch of grown adults, or at least teenagers using professional engines. They're a recipe for success. For the surprise of absolutely nobody, I couldn't make the engine by then. I worked on the engine and got it to stable level around 3 days in, but still without collisions nor anything of the type. On the way there, I used a lot of ChatGPT, like a lot. I thought this isn't really an issue. Let me check the rules. No Gen AI? Wait, I'm sure it's all encoding, right?
No Gen AI. If you use Gen AI, you're a loser. We don't like you. Not only will you be disqualified, but you'll be banned from everything I have the power to ban you from. We hate AI. We're not going to have any of it. A lot of people have asked if they can use AI code. We can't really police that, but don't.
Oh. Yeah, I was kind of cooked. So now I had to rewrite the engine, this time promising not to use ChatGPT. Except this time I used even more ChatGPT. Quite that the jam was already far from over, so my chance was not. Well, that's pretty bad, but why did I use ChatGPT so much? Did I use this before? Am I going to keep using this? And this is extremely important for me to make clear, because this could land me in trouble later. I did use AI from my previous projects, probably starting in the middle of development of Farmbotany. You see this comment? That explains it. I know AI is very controversial, and this is a serious problem. I used AI so much in development of the engine because of OpenGL, but we'll get to that later. I'm going to admit that it was very bad, and mostly lazy of mine, to have used it in Farmbotany. I'm sorry for that. From now onward, I promise I won't use AI for Farmbotany nor any of my projects. I'm not that much of an AI hater. I like it in some circumstances, but I've got to admit that using AI for creative works is incredibly lazy and soulless. You will absolutely get me for using it for personal reasons, but not for Farmbotany anymore. Anyways, back to the engine. I was thinking about naming it 3 Diamond Rust, except the name absolutely sucks, so I went with Cat Engine because just look at me. In the beginning, I was developing for 3D for this jam, and later for 2D. So I'll explain this first. Get ready to get technical. Hello everybody. So this section of the video is going to be heavily programming oriented. So if you don't really want to know how to use OpenGL, just skip to the next chapter. I originally wanted to record this on the roof, but it's kind of risky. I don't want to risk my entire cell phone just because of the video looking cooler. So on the back here we are. Okay, so to begin with, let's draw a white rectangle. For rendering, we need to use the GPU. You're wondering, why to use the GPUs? Why not just use the CPU? Why need a special compartment just for rendering? That's because the CPU has around 20 cores, and the GPUs has tens of thousands. But why don't we just do everything in the GPU then? Well, it does have some downsides. For example, it can do a lot less stuff. It also has a lot less RAM and a bunch of other things. So that's why you can't use the GPU for everything, but it's very, very good for rendering. You may think this is just a square, but it's not. It's actually 2 triangles. Everything in OpenGL or any GPU-based games is composed of triangles. And to get those triangles to draw, we need to first get the input values of those. You could just put in the 3 raw values into the triangles for each one of them, but that's a waste of memory because each one of those, 2 of these are the same value, so those don't really need to be there. In order to fix that problem, we just now 2 arrays, one for the positions and one for the indexes of those positions, and now it's more optimized. But now that we have the input values, now we need to draw it. So for that, we need shaders. You may think of shaders as that thing in Minecraft that makes the game pretty, and that is a shader, but you may also think that when you turn shaders off in vanilla, you are using no shaders, but that's not true. Any GPU-based game uses shaders, and they are the fundamental part for rendering graphics. There are two types of shaders, the vertex shader and the fragment shader. The vertex shader are the corners, each one of the square. Each one of them can include as an input a value, which must be included in as an uniform or as input value, which should be inputted from the CPU code using the helper functions in the shader structure I wrote. The vertex shader can also add outputs, not to the CPU code, but rather to the next type of shader, the fragment shader. The fragment shader is the coolest out of the two, and it is for each pixel. The calculations are you just type in and out of the value, and then the vertex shader out and the value, so that everything goes alright. Because each one of the pixels is just an interpolation from each one of those vertices, and that's why they're all triangles. Now we need to just set the frag color to that value you want, and none. But you need texture. I mean, a bunch of white rectangles aren't making a triple E. That's why we use UVs. UVs are just the coordinates of the screen where you want the texture where you want it to be drawn upon. If for a complete, you want to use something like this. For if you want to use half the texture, you want to use something like this. But keep in mind that 0 is the beginning and 1 is the end. Same thing is for X and Y. Now we should just bind the shader, and then that's it. You should open it up and you should see the UV perfectly on. If you have any questions before to DM me, man, I know my DM is gonna be absolutely filled. And if you don't understand it, then go yourself, because I'm not explaining it again. Yeah, now you should see a textured rectangle. You should see a textured rectangle. Let's talk about that. OpenGL sucks, at least for Rust. It's insanely poorly documented. This section here is all the documentation there is, and it's not even useful at all. There are only 2 tutorials I saw online. This book here, which only teaches how to draw a triangle, and is very outdated one, which teaches you how to draw an image. There is learnupingl.com, but it is written in C++, so basically anything that is in there is completely incomprehensible. So your best betting is to get the info from learnupingl.com and then try translating them to Rust. It also doesn't help that OpenGL and Rust are, by definition, very incompatible with each other. OpenGL is a very unsafe C API, and Rust is designed to have the highest amount of security and safety as possible. None of the functions, variables, or anything else are categorized, and the person who wrote these bindings really likes bitmaps. There are bitmaps for everything, even for true and false, I kid you not. And there's also the moment I learned that Vulkan has so much better documentation and performance, which really made my blood boil. It's so sad when you run the code and there's just nothing on the screen, or worse, a segmentation fault that tells you literally nothing about the problem. Like there really is some strange result, or some weird or strange result, but there's just that. That is the reason why I use AI so much on the engine. I'm honestly curious where did the AI got that info from, because there is generally nothing online. I was already really stressed when something wasn't working, and I was abducted to using AI because of the stress. And I got even more stressed thinking about if this is deathcore or not, what are the consequences of this, or if this is going to be worth it in the future. And the game chat time was decreasing, getting me even more stressed. And this just snowballed into me exploding. The reason why I didn't use the app for previous projects is just how much people are out there willing to help. In Godot, I would just go to the Discord server and call a helper, and there will be a bunch of people willing to help. But on this crap, there's only this dead Discord server. But that code ain't coding itself, kid, so you gotta work.
I've been keep my family fed. Living off energy drinks and Marlboro Reds. Swear this gas station food's gonna cause my death.
After the engine was done, I wrote a little bit of documentation and then published it. And there is only one thing left for me to do now. Is to remove Pygame and add Cat Engine. However, the switch wasn't just a import Cat Engine and Pygame and call it a day. They're completely different engines, and so switch was going to take days. But I got to work. After roughly 3 days, I managed to get the init process to work. Then after 3 days, I got the update cycle to work. And then I got it to work properly. And I did some finishing touches that are probably going to resize for the game. Not the menu though, the menu is published it in my blog, check it out by the way. And that's it. This update definitely took much longer than it should. But overall, I think it was a good thing that the engine switched and removed a lot of stress and technical debt from my part. The current performance is okay. I did not test Nico's computer yet, but I'm going to soon, and I'm probably going to post the results in the next video on the pinned comment. My computer, it runs around 700 FPS in a small window, a max scaled window at 300 FPS, and roughly 140 while recording. I think that's pretty good. Anything my computer becomes laggy when it is recording, and with this current broken GPU, my computer can barely run Terraria well, so for 0.6, I'm pretty sure I'm going to add the item descriptions, pause editing, exiting, translations, and maybe a couple extra things, so stay tuned. Before I finish, I want to talk about the current state of the studio, which I call CompuFactory. And I don't care to exist. I don't know, but I kinda like the name. Since now everybody has been fired, why did I say it like that? It's not like anybody has been paid or done anything at all from the studio. And I'm the only one here. At that point, why even call it a studio? But that's beside the point. H&A don't even have the skills nor will to work for Farmbotany. Carlos wants to but doesn't know how to work for Farmbotany. Nicholas says he isn't going to work for it and left. Wait a second, rewind a little bit. I will. Like, again. I will. Let me hear closer. Why am I even surprised at his point? He put future Python programmer on his bio. Like, there is nothing wrong with just admitting you're not gonna work for it, buddy.